1. I had a horse boarded in a community with lots of trails throughout the neighborhood, green spaces. There were miles of trails to use. Some people had houses that backed up to them and could just walk out their back gate and be on one. There were shared trails, bicyclists, hikers, and the horseback riders. Trail rules applied, and not being fenced-in areas, dogs were required to be leashed. One lovely day, I had gone out for a trail ride, just my horse and I. As I was coming up to where some houses were, I noticed a lady come out her back gate with an unleashed dog. I don't really care. I'm not one to say something. If your dog behaves off-leash, I don't see the big deal. I was ahead of them since they had to follow another path to get to the trail I was on. They picked up a jog and passed by me. The trail went down a decently sloped hill, but at the bottom was a fairly straight and flat area for about a half-mile. This is where I like to let my horse jog. I quickly caught up to the jogger and her dog. It was a 2-track trail, kind of like if a vehicle were driven on it, so plenty of room to pass. I call out and made my way around them, which is when the well-behaved off-the-leash dog became less well-behaved and starts chasing me on my horse. Lucky for me, my horse likes dogs, isn't scared of them, and couldn't care less we'd made a new friend. I hear the jogger calling to the dog, but it's obvious from her repeated calls the dog isn't listening. When I said earlier I don't care if your off-the-leash dog behaves, it's true. But the opposite is also true, and it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, pardon the pun, when something of this nature happens. And if rules had been followed, it wouldn't have. Could I have stopped, let her catch her dog, and made a remark about leash rules she surely knows about? Sure, but I wasn't in the mood. I was annoyed, but at the same time enjoying my ride, and then the petty kicked in. I'm just jogging along at this point, but we have other gears. It's been a while since we lipped this section, and it's a beautiful day. Cue to the canter and away we go. I didn't stop until the trail I wanted to take turned up the hog back again. I'm sure she caught up to her dog eventually. It wasn't with me when I slowed down. Maybe next time she'll think to have her dog on a leash, although I doubt it. Notes. The trail was sandwiched between 2 very steep hogbacks. There's nowhere the dog would go except after me or back to its owner. They're not the type of hills you just run up. The trail I took was a gradual climb to the top, and was actually headed back the direction I'd come from, just going up. If the dog had still been with me, I wasn't going to lead it to the other side. I would have waited for the owner. Also, at the time, it was revenge towards the owner. I was never mad at the dog for being a dog. To me, it was a failure of the owner. The dog and my horse were both fine. In hindsight, the owner could have been, and probably was, upset with their dog after such an event. I'm sure it was frustrating for them, but I can't say whether they took any of the situation as a reflection of the rules, being there for a reason, or to better train their dog. 2. I worked for a grocery store in Australia for close to a decade. It wasn't terrible, and management treated us with respect for my first few years there. If someone couldn't make a shift, they'd work with us to find a replacement. We were rarely short-staffed, so worst-case scenario, things would still run relatively smoothly, even if we were missing a few on a given day. Fast forward a few years. The good manager retires, and an assistant manager from a nearby store is promoted to managing this store. Brad. Brad approached the position with an ego, treating the store as his to fix, even though things had been running quite smoothly for years before he was in the picture. Part of his vision of fixing the store was stricter adherence to company-wide guidelines, in terms of staffing numbers and leave requests. For example, the amount of staff to be rostered on is determined by the number of customers through our doors each day. Staff who were actually experienced at this location knew that we needed more than what the company guidelines specify to be able to function effectively. Within the first month of Brad's tenure at this store, hours are being cut dramatically across the store, causing chaos as nobody was used to the added workload. When confronted about this by other members of management, he immediately dismisses them, quoting company guidelines. During the same period of time, staff began to notice that any request for leave was being instantly denied by Brad. Now, the company guideline is to give at least 2 weeks' notice if you know you'll need a day off. But it goes without saying, sometimes friends or family will make last-minute plans you'd like to attend, or you can't work a shift due to compassionate reasons. Prior to Brad, if you needed some time off, it was as simple as honestly communicating your situation with your manager. Almost always, we were able to come up with a solution, and taking a day off was never a big deal. Keep in mind these guidelines are just that, guidelines, not strict rules that must be enforced. Store managers are given a rather loose collar from higher management. As long as things are running smoothly and staff are happy, upper management will usually take a rather hands-off approach. They won't micromanage each individual store, ensuring every little corporate guideline is being adhered to, unless there are obvious issues requiring their attention. So now Brad's about a month into his position. We are short-staffed throughout the store. Everyone is stressed. Requests for leave are being denied due to the lack of staff that Brad caused in the first place. Brad quotes company policy each and every time he does this. He won't even allow us to organize someone else to cover shifts, as it's too much paperwork. It's a Saturday, and I'm due to work my regular shift that same night. I get a call from a friend with a spare ticket to see my favorite artist's sold-out show. I want to go, and I've spoken to a colleague who's willing to cover my shift, so I'm not screwing over my team. I call the store and I speak to Brad, tell him the situation, and that I have someone to cover said shift. Brad predictably gives me the same response that he's been giving everyone else. Sorry, as per Grocery Store X's staffing policy, you must give 2 weeks' notice for any time off. It doesn't matter if someone else is willing to take the shift. Cue malicious compliance. For a manager who's so into following the rules, I was surprised to discover that he never took into account Grocery Store X's sick leave policy. Staff are entitled to paid sick leave for a day without the requirement of a doctor's note. If you take 2 days or more off consecutively, then you need a medical certificate. I call back an hour later after my initial call. This time I tell Brad that I've come down with the most terrible headache, and that there is no way I can work that night. He doesn't even reply to me. I can faintly hear him angrily mumble that he'll have to call in a last-minute replacement before hanging up. It didn't take long for staff to catch on to this loophole. Staff needing time off with less than 2 weeks' notice would no longer bring it to the manager's attention immediately, instead opting to call in sick the day of each time. Obviously, this ensured further chaos in terms of lack of staff, a problem I never experienced in my near decade at the store. Brad quit after about a month and a half of being manager. Replacing him was the old assistant manager that has been at this location for several years at this point. It took a while to reverse the damage Brad had caused, but things got back to normal with someone who actually knew how to run the store at the helm. 3. Today, while casually browsing the internet, I popped onto a small video clip in which a comedian, Joe Lycett, tells the story of how he got off the parking fine by using British humor. Several comments claimed that only a Briton could avoid paying a parking ticket by being perfectly polite and at the same time ridicule the opponent. If that's so, I have to be British. To prove it, I will tell you a little story from my own life, as about 5 years ago, I managed to get myself out of an even more complicated situation. But let's start from the beginning. On one summer Saturday afternoon, I was moving into a new flat. There was no parking fines in front of my new building, but loading was allowed. So I left my car there and started to run up and down the stairs with boxes of my belongings. After the last heavy box landed on the floor of my new flat, I really needed a drink, so I started to rummage the boxes looking for a glass or a cup. One thing led to another, and when at 2 a.m. I finished unpacking, I went to bed for a well-deserved sleep. My building had 2 entry doors, so it was only Tuesday morning when I used the same doors again and bumped on my car parked right in front of them. I forgot to move my car after I emptied it of my boxes. Let's hope I didn't get a ticket, I thought. There was nothing on my windscreen. No letter came to me over the next couple of weeks, so I just sighed in relief and forgot all about this. A few months later, a strange letter came to me. Glasgow City Council informed me that I haven't paid some fine that, if I don't pay it now, I will have to pay 50% extra. I had no idea what it's about, so I truthfully answered by asking what it is all about, as I can't recall any unpaid tickets. In the next letter, they informed me that the ticket is for parking my car in a double yellow line. I answered again, truthfully, that I don't park in double yellow lines. As a former trucker, I'm aware of how annoying it is for drivers of bigger vehicles. Not to mention that I would like a fire engine to get to my place in case there is a fire. They answered that they have proof. I then politely asked them to show me that proof. In the next letter, there was a picture of my car clearly parked in double yellow lines. I instantly recalled the situation I described earlier while moving in. I see no reason to play the fool if I was clearly in the wrong, so since there was a copy of the ticket attached to the picture, I have decided to pay the fine instantly. It was written on the ticket that if I pay within 28 days from receiving the ticket, not from the day of its issue, then I only need to pay £30. I wrote a letter apologizing for my behavior, explaining that it was a genuine oversight, but since I was in the wrong, I am to pay the ticket, so I attached a check for £30. The check was cashed. Yet some weeks later I received yet another letter demanding to pay £60. It's claimed that since I failed to pay, and it is now more than 3 months, I have now to pay 50% extra. I answered that I paid within 28 days from the moment I saw the ticket for the first time. I got a 50% discount, and that they've already cashed the check, so it is surely some mistake. They answered again that they cut this £30 towards the total of £90. So I still have £60 to pay. I answered again that I paid within 28 days from the date the ticket was first delivered to me, so we should be square. I was lectured that if the ticket is put behind the windscreen wiper, it is considered to be delivered properly. I expressed my doubts, pointing out that if it was delivered properly, I would be aware of its existence. I pointed out that a ticket that is placed behind a windscreen of the parked car can be removed by anyone, so this is hardly a safe and reliable method of delivering important documents. The answer explained the matter to me in detail. The ticket that was placed behind the windscreen wiper of the car registered to me can be considered as a ticket delivered to me, as removing such a ticket is an offense, so I can't expect them to act on the basis of assumption that such a ticket would be removed. In my answer, I politely thanked them for this knowledge, admitting that it was new to me. I also informed them that I have put a check for £60 into an envelope, and I placed it behind a windscreen wiper of the bin lorry. This took a longer time for them to respond. The response can be summed up very shortly: WTF, what bin lorry? I was happy to explain. I quoted their previous letter and pointed out that since this bin lorry was registered to Glasgow City Council, and putting important documents behind a windscreen wiper of a vehicle belonging to the recipient is considered to be a proper way of delivering them, I consider the check to be delivered properly, and hope that this will help bring the matter to an end. The next answer arrived much quicker. It is probably due to this rush that it was slightly below the standards expected from the official letters sent to a taxpayer by a city council. To sum it up, the letter stated that one should not place important documents behind the windscreen wiper of a vehicle, as it can be easily stolen. There were also some doubts risen about my sanity. I was happy to assure them that I was perfectly well both on the grounds of my body and my psyche. I reminded them that stealing is a crime, and therefore we should not act on the basis of assumption that someone would steal their check from under the windscreen wiper of the bin lorry. I guess they were no longer amused. The next letter contained plenty of giant red letters, and informed me that the matter will now be dealt with by the sheriff's officers and messenger in arms. But if I don't like it, I can always appeal to a parking tribunal in Edinburgh. Of course, I did not like it, so I appealed to a parking tribunal in Edinburgh. The parking tribunal in Edinburgh was inanely unable to understand the issue. I paid my ticket, I agree that my car was parked on double yellow lines, and I still want to appeal? I then explained to them that I am not willing to contradict the ticket itself, but I am not happy with the fact that I am charged extra money, despite the fact that I paid a fine within 28 days from receiving a ticket. They finally agreed to consider the case, and set a date during one of their sittings in Glasgow, thus sparing me the trouble of travelling to Edinburgh. About a week before said date, I received a letter from Glasgow City Council. It said my ticket was cancelled. Now that's a different story. I rushed to write a letter in which I pointed out that if the ticket had been cancelled, then I assumed it was issued wrongly and therefore I paid money I should not have paid. I demanded my £30 to be returned to me. I never got any more letters regarding this matter, but on one sunny summer Sunday I logged into my internet banking to discover a payment of £30 from Glasgow City Council. So if I was able to fight the beast of bureaucracy in a way that, allegedly, only a Briton would be able to do, does it mean that I'm British already? But how? As when humbly and politely keeping in line with the law and wisdom poured down on me by officials, I was inspired by one of my favorite characters of the classic European literature, Yaroslav Hašek's The Good Soldier Švejk. Does it mean he was British as well? 4. So this happened several years back, say about 1997. My then husband John and I had been married almost 5 years. I was finishing my last semester of college, as well as working full-time, so I was gone a good bit. I thought as soon as these last classes were finished, we'd have so much time together to get started on our happily ever after. A couple of months after graduation, I learned the lying son of a bitch hadn't been as lonely at home as I thought. Not only, but his slut was preggo. So I threw him out and called in a divorce attorney. John proposed that I could have all the contents if he could keep the house. We'd only lived there less than a year, so the stuff in the house was worth more than our equity, so of course I'll go for that. So we had the paperwork drawn up and filed. In our state, the hearing date is set 30 days after the filing, for the judge to review everything, hear any testimony if needed, and basically finalize everything. The day after the papers were filed, I came home to a message from John on my answering machine, saying that X was his before we got married and he thinks he should be allowed to keep it. I called, left a message that the contents idea was his, and since he knew X was his in the house when he proposed this idea, it was mine. I responded to him the one time, but over the next couple of weeks, I'd come home to 2 or 3 messages per day about different things. An answering machine and phone that he'd forgotten at some conference, some collector's items. He had quite a large collection of sports memorabilia, and his high school yearbooks. A huge rag doll his aunt made him. Yeah, a 31-year-old man with a rag doll. I don't remember what else he kept thinking, or more and more stuff to call about. Now, obviously I had no use for his dolls or baseball cards or most of the other stuff he'd mentioned. But I was flat out pissed about the lying, cheating, preggo situation. Plus, he was getting all over my nerves with his daily calls. Anyway, I packed up all the stuff I wanted, including his prize phone, and I packed all the stuff I didn't want separately. My dad and brother came down with a moving van to help me get my stuff. The boxes of stuff I'd left for him were in the corner of the dining room. A few days after that was our court hearing. The judge read over our forms and asked if either of us wanted to say anything. John went on this tangent about all of the things in the house that were his, and I didn't have any right to blah blah blah. The judge listened for a minute but then interrupted to ask if all those items had been in the house when John signed the papers. John said yes. Judge asked if John wanted to withdraw his divorce filing and renegotiate. John said no. Judge asked if I had the aforementioned items, and would I be willing to let John keep them. I said sure, that had been my intention all along, and the stuff was in boxes in the corner of the dining room. Judge said divorce was finalized as per agreement. After all that, I was angry, hurt, betrayed, tired, disgusted, and just wanted to hurt him back. So my best friend Jane, who'd come to court with me, and I went back down to the house and moved all his boxes up to the attic crawl space. The only way up there was one of those ladders that fold up into the ceiling. It was at one end of the house, maybe 1/4 of the way from the end of the wall. We drug those boxes up the ladder and all the way over the ceiling joists and insulation to the far end of the house. The only light up there was one bulb above the ladder, so the boxes couldn't be seen without a flashlight. A couple of days later, when he took possession of the house, he called and asked me where all his stuff was. I said it was right there in the corner the last time I saw it. He said it's not there now. I said I don't know then. It was there when I left. Maybe somebody noticed nobody had been there for a couple of weeks and broke in. I told him to call my dad and Jane if he didn't believe me. He did. My dad confirmed they'd been in the corner of the dining room when we left with the last of my stuff. Jane confirmed they were in the corner. About 5 or 6 later, I ran into one of his cousins, Joe. He told me that John had married and later divorced his baby mama, and that he was now living in another state. I asked if he'd ever found his ball cards and stuff. Joe said not as far as he knew, but John had been pissed about it for years. John just knew I had them, but couldn't prove anything. I told Joe to tell John to see if he could get back into that house and check the attic. It turns out he'd sold it to another cousin, so he was able to get in. And then, oh my God, my phone blew up like dynamite. John called, but I hung up on him as soon as I realized who it was. He called back and called me every name in the book on my voicemail. I think he even made up a few. His mother called me and blessed me out. His sister called. It was hilarious. It had taken several years, but it was worth it. He kept saying I lied in court and Jane lied and my dad lied for me on the phone. I told him that nobody lied. The last time my dad was there, and the day we were in court, the stuff was in the dining room. But it pissed me off so much that day, Jane and I went and moved them. After that, we were very careful to only say in the corner, though technically nobody lied. He was livid. I still sometimes laugh about it until I literally can't breathe. That lying SOB had it coming, though. 5. I worked a job that required a lot of travel, like cross-country flights. The company policy stated that you only got paid for travel between the hours of 8 and 5. But everyone wanted to get home and see their families, and there was always a lot of work to do. So it was never ever questioned if you worked all day, then charged the travel for a late-night flight so you could be home and show up to the office and work the next day, as long as you didn't do something crazy. Well, one day a manager blew a budget, and to shave some pennies and save face with accounting, rejected travel hours for someone who traveled after 5, retroactively, without telling the employee to follow company policy. This person's paycheck took a hit, and needless to say, they were not happy since they had been asked to travel after hours to begin with. Now, there are many managers and many employees, and the employees talked. Turns out the whole department decided to go union style on them. If one manager could do it, then all could do it if accounting pressured them. We all agreed that we would simply follow policy and only travel between 8 and 5. Sounds simple, right? The implication of adhering to the policy while not working for free is that sure, the hours are the same, but other managers lose time in the office. More importantly, on one or both ends of the business trip, people would need to book an extra day of hotel, rental car, and all the associated meals to stay within company policy that hadn't been budgeted by management on all upcoming work. The end result, of course, is that this would cause all other managers to lose money unnecessarily, and the company was forced to announce they would no longer enforce that policy, and they retroactively approved that employee's hours and paid him. This took about a day to have the desired effect. The mere threat of this by employees caused all other managers to freak out. To be honest, most of the managers didn't agree with the policy to begin with. It was a corporate thing, and everyone knew that manager who did that was a jerk. All our time and travel is billed to clients anyways, so there is literally no downside to letting employees travel after business hours and paying them. Same company tried to not reimburse my business travel expenses from my last 2 months of working there because I no longer had an employee ID, so they couldn't send me a check. Those expenses were surely billed to the clients, and they'd try to just pocket that money. Funny how, with the right kind of pressure, that money got direct deposited. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 129. I think, let me check. It's my second time doing this, you think I'd have checked? It is, it's 129. See, I know what I'm doing. Okay, now, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you have a story of your own, please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. Right, let's see. I do have a little shout out to do. Shout out goes to the author of story number 3. And if you look in the description, you'll see I'm not linking to Reddit. I did find the story on Reddit, but they also have a blog. So I'm linking to the blog, which also contains the story. It has the Joe Lycett clip they mentioned as well at the top of the blog. It's kind of linked on the YouTubes. So you can click along, you can see the clip that we're talking about. And if it's a story I'm thinking of, he's told this in a few different places. And it's quite a good story. And, oh, my cheeks look rather red today, don't they? Okay. Right, anyway, let's see. So I do apologise if I'm getting this wrong. Orinsky.eu, I think that's the name of the blog. There's a bunch of other things on there. I might get to Scotland and about me, of course, and cookies and stuff, which is always good. Cookies are good. We like cookies here. We are fans of cookies. Okay, so head along and have a little look at their blog if you have time. Right, let's see. Now, we do have a birthday shout-out today, and today's birthday shout-out goes to our resident hamster fan, our hamster enthusiast, or our hamster nut. Meant with affection, I assure you, Carly. And Carly doesn't say how old they are, but they were born April 6th, 1991. So we can all work out that they are 54 years old. Okay, now, as it is the start of April, your birthday, Carly, as is policy here in the Hellfreezer community, you are allowed to celebrate your birthday for the rest of the month. So that means lots of hamsters, cute little animals. Then on the food side of things, because obviously we don't eat the hamsters here, and that's very bad indeed. You get to have lots of refreshments. You get to have lots of cookies, cake, Chinese food, whatever you're into. Just make sure you spoil yourself. Okay. Let's see. I think that's everything. For this video. Before we go, of course, we're going to sing Happy Birthday. And then we'll wrap up for today. Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Carly. Happy birthday to you. Okay. I think I looked a little weird singing that there. We'll work on that part. I'm more used to singing when the camera's not on me. We'll work on that part. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.